Am I live? Yeah. Okay, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our first ever annual members meeting. But we've never done it in this virtual form before, so it's really is an experiment, and we hope we are reaching all of you. My name is David Astley, and I have the great pleasure of being the chair of the South East Coast Ambulance Service. And today we'll have the opportunity to hear from colleagues on our responses, not only to the coronavirus pandemic, but also we're taking a look back at our performance and achievements over the last year. We'll also talk about areas we still need to improve on. The event will be recorded and shared more widely for those who could not make it to this live event. Today is very much a two-way conversation with our members, so towards the end of the presentations, we've allocated a good amount of time for a question and answer session with all of you. There are three dots towards the top right of your screen, and within this is a question and answer tab where you can type your questions, and these will be picked up and put to the panel in due course. The minutes of last year's annual members meeting were approved at the December 2019 council meeting and are available to view on our website for your reference. The COVID pandemic has been hard for everyone in different ways, but for SECAmb staff, knowing that what we do makes a difference to those we serve, has kept us going through some very difficult times, as does the huge amount of support we've had from the public, who have been most appreciative of the work of our clinical teams, and we are really grateful for that acclaim. What we'd like to do now is play you our new compilation film, which features the issues and challenges that many of our colleagues have experienced during the pandemic. So that will come up onto your screen shortly.
From ambulance wraps to new ways of working, Team SECAmb has adapted, learned and fundamentally changed forever as it responded to a global pandemic. During an historical period of our lives, our staff tell their stories of working through this time. In early February, news hit of the first British national to be infected with COVID-19, a businessman from Brighton returning from Singapore.
So we knew that the focus was going to be on us, so we immediately started doing some plans to get us ready for COVID. I think there's a little bit of fear of the unknown, but as is pretty typical in our area, we put the first swabulances out at 24 hours notice, so there was a real can-do, and that's carried on throughout.
The Trust's fleet department hit this challenge head on.
Overnight we had to convert some old PTS vehicles into swabulances. Luckily enough we had them parked up waiting to be disposed, so we sort of like dragged them out, gave them all a quick service and started converting them, and overnight I think about 48 hours we converted 5 vehicles and they was on the road straight away, and then within 2 weeks I think we converted 35 vehicles. And because we converted them that quickly, we even had LAS and SCAS South Central asking us if they could loan these vehicles off us. So yeah, as a department, I'm really proud of what the guys have achieved, really.
From fleet to logistics, the challenge was on. But with PPE in short supply around the world, Alex Darling from our emergency and resilience team was called in to provide support to a dedicated but overstretched team.
Long days and nights and weekends working, but the team have been here, and that team, they've had to very quickly go from doing business as usual to step up. And we're in a warehouse now of equipment that is specifically been brought in for coronavirus. It's a level and a volume of stock we'd never usually need. It's been such a big task. We've relied and worked closely with Kent Fire and Rescue. We've had support from Team Rubicon. We've had the CFRs helping out. It's been a colossal task, and it wouldn't have worked without everyone pulling together to do it.
And the support went beyond just assisting the logistics team. From welfare vehicles to temperature checking to morale boosting quizzes at the 111 call centre, our team of volunteers have not let us down.
The welfare car started, which was really good fun. You actually met these crews and they saw you for you, not just a CFR, and I really do feel that that has worked, because now we're back out, I see the same people. And they do say, oh, I remember seeing you at the welfare van, and, you know, chat, and we're all friends again. So I feel it's brought us in closer together to the SECAmb family, for want of a better word.
As the country moved from the containment to the delay phase in its response to the COVID outbreak, efforts turned to ensure that we protected our core services. And in the early days of the pandemic, 111 was being overwhelmed by calls.
But it was just obviously, it wasn't the staffing levels essentially, it was the call volume that we couldn't deal with. So even if we had all our staff in, we still wouldn't be able to deal with the volume. But then Pathways gave us that easement in terms of the agile working, and that's where we obviously initiated with Rachel doing the initial trial. It was really interesting that the agile working from a health advisor point of view was able to kick off, and I think Rachel done a really good job in terms of demonstrating that it was a feasible option for us to continue with.
I then received the letter from the government saying about that I needed to go into self-isolation as I was high risk. I was okay about being at home, but it was the support side of things that I just, when Lee said to me about would I trial it, and I was like, yeah, that's absolutely fine, keep my mind on the job and you know, keep up to date with everything. And I think, because if I didn't do it, I would have gone a bit crazy for being at home for 12 weeks.
It also meant agile working for the majority of support staff, which brought with it its own set of challenges for some.
My dad is really unwell and is really elderly. We stopped the carers going to him, and I took it up myself. As a working parent, you just get on with it, you know, and it was new for everyone. The kids were, you know, working from home, etc. But it really did become very, very challenging.
Have you signed it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, my loved ones and myself are still here, really.
COVID cases in the capital were increasing, and our colleagues at London Ambulance Service called on mutual aid, and our staff did not hesitate to offer their assistance.
So I have a lot of friends that work for London Ambulance Service, so I really heard it from a first-hand experience of how busy they were and how severely and how critically unwell a lot of their patients were. And when we got to London, I think the fact that when we were prepped about how serious it was and how severely unwell these patients were, I think that pretty much hit home straight away on the first day of how unwell these patients could be and how frequently we would be seeing them.
The reality of what was happening was also being felt in our region, as staff had to deal with some very heartbreaking cases.
It's really tough. I think those jobs can be tough anyway, but then when you know it's most likely to do with COVID, especially when they're quite young or something, it's really tough. I think was my first cardiac arrest. That was quite, because all the protocols are different and you had to remember those, but it's wearing all the PPE as well is really tough. Knowing when to put it on and what to take in, and especially if you're first there, and it's just different.
And the pace of change was also being felt deeply in our EOCs.
It was very concerning. On a personal level, my mum had to go into shielding, so it was very difficult to see my family not being together because we're very, very close. But then coming here and just sort of hearing all the stories of people that were having to deal with query COVID at the time, that again was very, very difficult. And also protecting the welfare of the team, who were going to have to go through more, what's what I'm looking for, more sort of disruption than I was going to have to go through, because they had to keep up to date all the time with all the regular updates that were coming through for Pathway.
And the impact the virus was having on our elderly population was coming into stark reality.
One of the first calls I took was from a care home, and it was the possible suspected COVID case in there, and I asked her how many residents were there, and they had 50+ patients on that floor. and you just saw it escalate. You just thought, wow. None of us knew what to expect at the end of the day. You know, we had to experience all the social distancing in the EOC, all being separated, all being divided, and very unique time.
Our staff were also feeling the effects of COVID. One member of staff, Raju, became very unwell after contracting it.
Unfortunately, I caught COVID, classic symptoms actually, and now that we know that ethnicity has an influence as well, we're not sure why, but it really affected me, and I was really quite ill. Do you know what? As the symptoms progressed and I felt further into the illness, you know, I thought to myself, gosh, is there a real risk of me being really ill, and as it reached its crescendo of me being so unwell, I thought, gosh, could I actually die from this?
Operating Unit Manager Andy Rowe saw a former colleague and friend, bank paramedic practitioner Peter Hart, succumb to the virus at a time when he was also supporting his team as they dealt with the deaths of 2 members of staff.
You do the right thing and you go into almost like an automated system where you must do this, must do that, must support, must do this. I think until the day of the funeral, it was all very surreal. Once you go, and I was privileged to be part of the procession, drove the lead car, and you see the love that was there for Peter. Suddenly you realise that more than ever, what a big green family we are, how much it affected everyone. And I think we all thought, there go I, but the grace of God. And it makes you realise your own mortality. And that probably is the reason that every day you get up, you think, right, must wash hands, must put the mask on, must do what we need to do, because I don't want my family to go through what Peter's family went through, or my friends.
Operating Unit Manager Will Bellamy has kept a diary of this historic time as he reflects on the support and leadership he has provided to his team.
I use the word "I'm frightened" quite a lot in the diary at the beginning, and I was frightened for my staff and the team. You know, did I have enough PPE? Were people fit tested? What am I doing? How do I, you know, deal with people and speak to people, have real honest conversations, and show a bit of vulnerability in myself, even though I'm the senior leader in this area. Actually go, I'm frightened too, but I'm conscious that I'm also going to stand on the front line with you. I'm going to respond to patients.
The impact of COVID isn't always visible, as we have seen a number of staff forced to shield to either protect themselves or loved ones. The effect on their mental health cannot be underestimated.
All of a sudden, I get a letter saying you need to shield. And I think people's perception of what shielding was like for me was like, oh, it's a great time being at home, and actually it's very much a prison sentence for somebody like me. And then of course through shielding they started passing out work where people needed help, and the gentleman I'm working for now reached out saying I need some help. The role that I have now and being given that opportunity has made me feel empowered again.
Other positives to emerge from this pandemic have seen new horizons for flight attendant Billy, who joined our team at West EOC.
Pretty much I was mid-air on one of my last flights, and we all kind of sat together and said, look, this could be one of our last flights in a while. Little did I know it would be one of the last flights I do in about half a year. I think if I was actually locked down in my house and not able to do anything, I would have gone stir crazy. And luckily, because I only live literally 5 minutes down the road, I was able to, when my friend said, do you want the job? It's based in Manor Royal. I thought, well, that's round the corner from the Virgin's headquarters. I thought, this is great. Flying is a great life and I love it. But actually doing this as well is actually enabled me to do a job that I still enjoy, that I can still help people and actually can make a difference.
Wendy, Brighton OU's cleaner, was overwhelmed when staff presented her with gifts following her dedication during this COVID pandemic.
Yeah, it was unnerving, but being here and being part of the setup was also very rewarding. It was actually quite hard work because I did extend my hours a little bit because we've got enhanced cleaning procedures in place, etc. By contract 6 days a week, so I put that up to 7 days. So I was coming in on the Saturday and the Sunday to do this site, keep on top of the cleaning, because there's so many people coming through here. Interesting that it's probably the best job I've ever had in terms of, although it's a fairly basic job, it's quite physical, I'm with the best bunch of people I could be working with.
Our service also said thanks to the public for all their support, with an ambulance rap competition which saw thousands of submissions from across the region following a suggestion made by Neville Betley.
And I happened to go into a supermarket one time and I saw all these shop workers just milling around. There's people clapping for us, being really supportive for us. And I thought, you know what, there's a lot of people out there doing things that they're not really getting a lot of recognition, they're not getting a lot of support, and the public are just being great. We need to find some way of giving back. And I thought, wow, actually, you know what, I bet that'd look good on the side of the ambulance. I've seen the Pride ones and the Poppy ones and how marvellous they looked. So I thought, well, this could look good. So I didn't really have any idea what it was going to look like until I saw it on that first day. And I thought, yes, they just look the business. It made me smile, and I thought, well, it's going to make everyone smile.
All this under the leadership of our COVID-19 response director, Bethan Eaton Haskins, who, with a 3-year-old son, has also had our own demands to manage, but like the rest of Team SECAmb, she did not hesitate to rise to the challenge.
I'm somebody that would rather be leading something than having to follow, so I was more than happy to, if people felt that I was capable of doing so, more than happy to try and step up. It has not been without its challenges. My son has made some guest appearances at some meetings, including board meetings, but actually I think we've all had to learn, haven't we, to adapt. We've sort of coined the phrase Team SECAmb. It's about what we can do when we truly work together and the differences we can make by doing so. And I think whilst we think we might have done that in the past, this has really shown what we can do if we don't have our silos and we work all as one.
Thank you very much indeed. That was really powerful, and I think it highlights a number of things to me. And I think there'll be a chance later on in the questions and others to perhaps for others to comment. But made me feel proud to be part of Team SECAmb, and I think whatever role we have, and I thought that film showcased the wide variety of roles we have within the organisation and the part everybody played and how everybody played a key role in terms of helping the people we serve. I think he also showed the way the ambulance sector generally comes together as a family, and that I think in these challenging times within the NHS, I think the way we stepped up to the plate to help our colleagues in London as part of mutual aid, that again speaks volumes for the sector we're currently working within, and I think the wider NHS. But I think more powerfully, the most powerful message to me was the emotional journey our staff have been on, because it involved families, the public. We've sadly lost colleagues. Peter Hart was mentioned, who's a much respected colleague of the Team SECAmb, but across the country as well, we've lost staff from ambulance services who've given everything for supporting the public at a time of a national emergency. So I think that brings together that short film. I think really encapsulates both SECAmb's fantastic contribution, but also the wider NHS and the challenges we face. So. Thank you for those that produced the film, and I hope the public in particular watching this were able to appreciate the work that we've done on their behalf. So now I'd like to hand over, please, to Philip, our Chief Executive of Bastel, who's going to make a short presentation. Philip.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. You should see a slide deck coming up, and we'll go on to the first slide. So my name is Philip Astle, for those of you who I haven't met, and I'm the Chief Executive of SECAmb, and I have been for about 1 year and 2 days. In fact, exactly 1 year and 2 days. So can we go to the next slide? This slide is one that shows how we are made up, and we have 4,500 staff-ish, but what I'm really proud of is we've got 10,000 members of the public, and even more proud of the 500 volunteers who support us on our day-to-day basis and on our day-to-day operations. Flicking on to the next slide, please, AG. So looking back the purpose of this session that we've gathered for today is a review of the year 2019-20. In terms of our leadership, thank you to Fiona, who you'll all meet again if you haven't met her before when she joins us on the panel in a minute. But thank you to Fiona for looking after the trust for the first half of that year, doing such a great job until I took over in September. Our newest member of the executive team is Ali Mohammed, who joined as the Director of Human Resources in January. We got a really good set of NHS staff survey results in February, which just gives us an indication of engagement, and that's indicated by that high return rate. And then a whole list of things that we set ourselves a target of doing during the year to try and make life better, to improve our relationships, and to improve the way in which we recruit, educate and develop our people. In terms of performance, we go on to the next slide. This slide on the left hand side is talking about the 999 business, so the emergency side of our business. And you can see in the boxes where we did well, so relatively close or ahead on category 1 and 2. But in category 3 and 4, further away from where we should be. And that trend, I'm sorry to say, is continuing, but we're getting closer a bit. It's an area that we need to continue to improve. In terms of 111, we only started the service at the beginning of last year, and it was a challenging start. And you can see that by some of the performance indicators there, including that we had a 12% abandonment rate. I'm delighted to say that those figures are now much better in the current year, and we have a good abandonment rate, and we're well in with the national average of call answered. So looking at our clinical and financial performance on the next slide. So we've given you an indication of just 4 of our clinical measures. We measure all sorts of things, and in most cases we are just below the national average in terms of the clinical. But where they are measuring things like bundles, the stroke diagnostic bundle and the STEMI care bundle, and the sepsis care bundle, those are materially affected by the way in which we report them. And so later on in the year, you can see them all going up at the end, towards the end of the year, and that's carried on for this year. And that's primarily, or significantly helped by the implementation of an electronic patient record that all our staff have on their iPads. It just makes it easier to record, but also provides prompts for various bits. In terms of finance, we got, and David will give you more detail about this, but it was about bang on. You've got a £0.3 million surplus, so that was just about spot on. In terms of other highlights, so the next slide, please. We had the CQC report in the summer, rated as good overall for the first time in far too long. But brilliantly, our urgent and emergency care service rated as outstanding. That was such a relief to everybody who's been working on the improvement journey for many years, and well deserved by our staff who had been perhaps under-reported for some time, I suspect. But it was a really good recognition of a long and painful journey. We made good progress on a number of large projects, some of which are just about ready to come out now. So the new Make Ready Centre in Brighton, we started last year, and we will move into it this year. We made continuing improvements at Worthing, at Sheppey, And we got started the journey for major developments at both Banstead and Medway, which will be the most significant base in our area when it's finished. We've continued our work on the fleet programme, making sure that our vehicles, starting the work to make sure our vehicles are newer and are replaced more often. I've already mentioned the electronic patient care record, so it was brand new for last year, but by the end of the year, over 90% of all our patient records had moved from paper records to electronic records, which was great. And then we built some new relationships, and there were some really good, solid projects that are still going and expanding today, like the joint response units in Kent and Sussex. I want to move on from last year and just talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, our response to that. So you should be looking at a slide now which gives the 3 phases of the pandemic. So the first phase was how we reacted at the beginning. It was typified by that massive pressure that we're talking about on the film on NHS 111. And it was looking as though it was going to be exactly the same for the 999 service until the 23rd of March when we went into lockdown. And at that stage, our demand abated, and we were able to provide help to other places, such as supporting London Ambulance Service, again, as you saw on the film. We were able to develop new services, an emergency critical care transfer service, using some really innovative approaches, such as a thing called a jumbulance, which we didn't get much use of, but it was used, and it's proved a concept that should there be a second wave, might still be useful to us. And at that stage, we had real challenges around PPE. We were testing as the government decided and directed, but mostly, if you remember that phase of the operation, we were hearing what we were supposed to be doing at the 5 o'clock daily briefing from the government. And so the management team were having to keep right on their toes, and we moved to a daily change rhythm. But we kept, throughout the whole of this, we kept our normal focus on making sure that we were doing things carefully, safely, and we were looking for risk to patients, risk to staff, and everything before we implemented anything, even when we were running on a 24-hour change cycle. Then during June to August, it began to slow down, and our focus changed onto protecting the core services, making sure that we didn't have outbreaks in our big operation centres or the 111 call centre, or any particular ambulance stations or make-ready centres. This stage we had consolidated the PPE, and Alex Darling and his team were able to provide a really safe set of equipment for most of our staff. At that stage, we were still having some staff who couldn't get masks to fit, and so we were managing that. We were supporting those who were shielding, and trying to manage fatigue. We were beginning to say to people, take some leave, go away, take some days off, because people had been working really flat out in the early days. And then at the end of that period, we had those periods of really high hot weather, leading to really high demand. And it was during this period that that demand overtook our capability to respond. We still had lots of people shielding. We still had people sick with COVID. We still had normal sickness, and we also had very high demand on days 14–15% above the previous years. So that was a really difficult period. And as we moved into August and September, we focused on shifting to embedding learning, with dealing with that operational challenge that we've just been talking about. Getting our staff safely out of shielding and back into roles, either on the front line or, for those that still weren't safe, either in operation centres or elsewhere. And then crucially, preparing for a second spike. So that's been our COVID journey, which I thought was illustrated really well on that film. So thank you for the team that made that. So let's look a bit further forward and move on to my last slide. So our immediate challenges, of course, are about 999 performance. They always will be, always, and will always be our #1 priority, because performance is nothing more than a shorthand for the way the quality of the service that we're providing to our patients and patient care. So we will continue to take that really important issue first and centre. Meanwhile, we'll continue our planning for the second spike, for the winter flu season, for bad weather, and for the implications of finally moving away from the EU, potentially with a no-deal Brexit. We've got a couple of major projects coming along, and we go live with our NHS 111 Clinical Advisory Service, that's what CAS stands for, on the 1st of October. So that's 3 weeks away, and we are looking forward to delivering that new service to the patients in both Kent and Sussex. And then there's a thing called Think 111 First, which I'm sure people will have heard of. This is about stopping people walking into A&E or ED departments when they could be going somewhere else. And that will be something that we'll be helping with, we suspect, and that's probably a couple of months later, so around Christmas time. And further ahead, we're looking at the effects, the after effects of the pandemic. This is after we've managed to get the inoculations, get our staff inoculated, and then we'll suddenly all across society start thinking about, okay, what's next? And there will be a financial impact about the huge amount of money that's been spent in government, and we will have to be reacting to that. We'll be fully embedding the learning from COVID, and that will change the way we do business in some cases, and in some cases forever, and some cases and mostly for the better. We'll engage much more closely with the systems, because during COVID, the COVID has speeded up the system engagement that has happened around us, around the counties that we serve, and in the integrated care systems. So we'll be maximising opportunities that gives us, and hopefully we will continue to grow and expand. I'm going to stop there. The questions will come when we move into the panel phase. So at this stage now, I'm going to hand you on to David Hammond, who will talk to you a little bit more about that very balanced financial performance that we talked about.
Thank you very much, Philip. Good afternoon, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to be here today to be able to present the financial results for the last financial year. I'll just pause for just a second while the slide deck is loaded, because rather than just listening to me, having something to look at in terms of the numbers will probably be helpful. Thank you very much, AG. So today I'll give you a fairly quick tour through the results and cover the main areas. I think, as I've shared previously, just in order to set the scene, whilst the AMM is predominantly focused, as is SECAmb, on providing the best patient care that we possibly can, the financial performance is also really important, because without having a sound financial base on which to build the organisation, which is secure and sustainable, we really struggle to be able to deliver the best patient care that we can. If you could move a couple of slides on for me, please. Lovely, thank you very much. So I will cover the areas as on this slide, and if you could move one slide forward again, please. I think it's really important, as I say, that the finances do influence the way that we are able to respond to our patients, the way the resources and equipment that our staff have and also that goes right the way down to the environment within which we deliver the patient care. So as the slide highlights, 1920 was a year of improvement for SECAmb on our ongoing improvement journey and of continuous investment. We delivered the plan that we said we would, and we did manage to invest in a huge amount of stuff and equipment and so forth. Could we move the slide on one more, please? So, as Philip said, we did meet our planned position. At the moment, we aim to be a break-even organisation, which effectively means that everything we receive, we put back into the trust in terms of expenditure into patient care. In order to achieve this, we do receive a central allocation for hitting our targets. So that's what the 1.8 million of provider sustainability funding is for. Now, this is an acknowledgement that the trust runs a small structural deficit. This is a systemic issue which pre-COVID was planned to be resolved by the NHS 5-year plan and the frameworks which was there. We will now have to wait and see how that will play out as we move into the post-COVID world and into next year. So in other headlines for 1920, the cash balance was increased and we maintain a healthy cash balance. This is there to make sure that we can pay for future investments and such as the ones that Philip's talked about already and that I will come on to talk about a bit later. And within the year, we also delivered our efficiency and productivity target, which we call SIPs, of 7.1 million. So that allows us to continue to improve the service, even though we do run at a break-even position. So as we get more efficient, we can, in theory, put more resources on and do more with the same, which is very, very important. If we could move on to the next slide, that will detail our income position for the year. So as you can see, we have increased our income over the last 2 years. It continues to grow. That takes account of new contracts, but it also takes account of central allocations for things like changes in Agenda for Change, so the pay and other inflationary pressures. The slide also shows, by looking at the net surplus figure, which Philip referred to of 0.3 million on the right-hand side, that we continue to put this into the service rather than save it for a rainy day or for future investments. So at the moment, as I say, everything we get in, we put back into the service to deliver patient care and invest in the infrastructure for the staff. If we could move on, please. So it's really interesting, I think, as we get into the next couple of slides to understand where the income came from and where we spend it. So as you can see on there, the majority of our income at the moment comes from our 999 contract. 111 continues to be a growth area, and as Philip's mentioned, from the 1st of October, we will be going live with a new contract for 111 clinical advice service for both Sussex and Kent, which will continue our growth in that area. And that represents a huge area of growth for not only the trust, but for the health economy nationally. The other areas there are quite self-explanatory, and the PSF at the bottom reflects the structural deficit that I referred to earlier on. If we could just move to the next slide, please. So how we spent the money, again, this I think is very important. You can see that we spend around 70% of our income directly on pay. We then the rest of the costs are there, as you can see, to deliver frontline services, whether they be through our frontline operations, our EOCs, or our 111 service. Within that, under the depreciation line, that is how we make sure that we can refresh our assets and our infrastructure at the rate that we need to, by holding that back and making sure that we save that up for the refresh in the future. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Now, the statement of financial position, and for those of us who've been doing these things for a while, we might recognise this as more, as also called the balance sheet, reflects the financial health of the organisation, as you can see. The blue lines, which is 1920, continue to be above the previous year, which basically means that we are increasing our asset base by some of the developments that we're making that Philip's referred to over and above the previous years, which is a great place to be. And we will continue to do that in order to invest in the trust. And if we could have the next slide, please. And some of that investment is highlighted on this slide. So we have made investments in IT and infrastructure. So that includes the electronic patient record, further CAD improvements. We continue to invest in clinical medical equipment, and whilst we refreshed some of the, you can see the picture of the defibrillator there, that is an ongoing refresh process which will continue into this year. We brought in 75 new vehicles last year and continue with an even bigger number as we work through this year. That's really, really important because we do acknowledge that the age of our fleet is not where we'd like it to be, and we will continue with that investment as we go through. And within that, we've also spent, as the slide says, 1.5 million of the on equipment to go into those new vehicles, and again that will continue. And then finally, some of our improvement in infrastructure being estates, particularly Brighton, which is very, very near completion for our new MRC. We've done a phase 1 huge piece of estates work for Worthing, and we're going into a phase 2 at the moment. We pre-planned for a complete revamp of the station at Sheppey, which will also be delivering very shortly. And then we've done a lot of planning and pre-planning and planning applications, etc., for our sites at Banstead and Medway, which are obviously multi-year projects. So you can see, I hope from that we continue to invest in the trust to deliver the best care that we can. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation. As I say, I appreciate finance isn't the most riveting subject in an organisation which isn't here to deliver bottom line returns, but is here to deliver patient care. But I hope that illustrates how important it is that we keep the baseline as it needs to be to allow us to invest, to keep improving the service as we go. And I present to the Council of Governors and the members the annual report and accounts for this year, and hope they will receive them as presented. Thank you very much. It now gives me great pleasure to hand over to Nikki Pointer, who is our lead governor, who will give you an overview of the work that the Council of Governors have done in 2019-20.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nikki Pointer and I am the Public Governor for Lower East of SECAmb. I represent the interests of the people of Lower East Sussex, including Brighton, on the Council of Governors. This report will focus on how the Council, a group of 24 volunteers, including members of the public, staff and people from our key partner organisations, have fulfilled its statutory duties in the past year. Our collective duties are twofold: to represent the interests of our Foundation Trust members and the wider public, and to hold the non-executive directors to account for performance of the board. I'll also touch on the Council's perception of the Trust as it continues to progress with plans for significant improvements and embedding the improvements already made. Of course, as I wrote this mid-March, the Trust is focused on coordinating the South East-wide response to the coronavirus outbreak. It's a huge task for management, but much was learnt and already in place from the contingency planning in a case of a no-deal Brexit earlier this year. COVID-19 notwithstanding, overall the Council has been really pleased to see the Trust making improvements. SECAmb's frontline staff providing care face-to-face with patients or over the phone through the 999 and 111 call centres have consistently provided a caring service. This year the Trust was recognised as good by the CQC, giving governors an independent source of assurance that the things were really moving in the right direction regarding to the Trust leadership, clinical governance, public safety and quality of care. Improving the Trust leadership and governance has really made a difference this year. The Council has appointed a number of new directors within the Trust and have been involved in the recruitment and selection of our new Chief Executive, Philip Astle, after Darren Mockery left us for pastures new and moved closer to his Scottish home, and a new Director of HR. The Council appoints independent, non-executive directors who sit on the board alongside the executive directors and provide oversight and an assurance that the Trust is operating effectively and for the benefit of our patients. The Council has recruited and appointed one non-executive director during the year, Howard Goodbourne, who brings vast relevant experience to the board. We have also worked closely with other non-executive directors who attend our 4 council meetings a year, where we raise issues from our own experience and interacting with the Trust. As governors, we feel we are taken seriously and our concerns are usually followed up. We have also appraised the performance of all our non-executive directors over the year and reviewed their remuneration. I'm pleased to say that the issues governors have raised were listened to. The openness between the council and non-executives is very welcome, and their responsiveness to issues we've raised has been, we hope, beneficial to the Trust, its staff and its patients. Having said that, often the issues we raise are already high on their agenda, which is fantastic. And of course, sometimes things take longer to change than we would like. We also have a good relationship with our chair, and he makes much appreciated time for 2 meetings a year with the governors from each constituency to frankly discuss how we think things are progressing. Despite ongoing improvements needed, the Council is generally content that the board has a firm grip on the priorities for the Trust. Everyone recognises there will always be improvements that can and should be made. Here's a flavour of what we've focused on this year on your behalf. Receiving assurance that health and safety of our staff is being effectively protected. Seeking continuous improvement to our safeguarding practices. Improving the Trust response to patients requiring transport of mental ill health. Continuously looking for better performance for our lower acuity patients. These are category 3 and 4. There is much to do at time of writing and seeking improvements in call answer times, which we have been pleased to see made sustained. Ensuring that the Trust's commitment to staff engagement was sustained, asking for clarity around how volunteers access charitable funds they've raised and ensuring the visibility of community first responders' contribution to Trust performance. Raising concerns that issues around clinical education in the Trust were not seen earlier by the board. Seeking assurance about improvements needed in the HR Directorate. This includes improving recruitment process and staff retention. Urging the Trust to join a partnership with the police to ensure staff that are assaulted are supported with the full weight of the law. Supporting the Trust communications about the new NHS 111 clinical advice service and pushing improvements in our clinical outcomes, particularly around strokes. We held 2 workshops with the full board of directors, one to share our views about the Trust's strategic position and plans for the future, and the other to focus on what it means to be a membership organisation and how we can make better use of all the insight we can gain from our members. In addition, as usual, governors have been out and about over the year, meeting people at events and plugging ourselves into our local communities. We visited a MenCap event for people with learning disabilities, Trans Pride in Brighton, a patient forum at Kent and Canterbury Hospital, Surrey Minority Ethnic Forum and Eastbourne 999. For example, if we met you there, we hope you joined our membership. At SECAmb, we have taken part on your behalf in quality assurance and patient safety visits to Trust premises, helped review and set SECAmb's quality objectives for the year and contributed to the Trust patient experience strategy. We observed board committees which have been well run with great engagement, challenge and support from all involved. Our annual members meeting, planned by the Council of Governors Membership Committee, was a roaring success with the biggest attendance SECAmb had ever seen. It was fantastic to meet so many members of the public and committed SECAmb staff and volunteers, and even the air ambulance graced us with a landing. Elections were held in February 2020, and we were sorry to see 2 colleagues weren't re-elected, our then lead governor, Felicity Dennis, as well as Harvey Nash. 2 other governors chose not to stand for re-election, Roger Laxton and Nick Harrison. 3 governors resigned during the year for various reasons, and I'd also like to thank them, James Crawley, Frank Northcott and Lorraine Tomasi. And finally, Marion Trendle stood down after 9 years, which is the maximum term as an appointed governor, having worked so hard to improve SECAmb's response to people with mental ill health in both her professional capacity and as governor. We were also very pleased to welcome 7 new colleagues to the Council in March who bring a wealth of diverse interests and experience. It is important that governors come and go fairly regularly. This brings us new experience and insight and fresh eyes on SECAmb to the Council. Finally, a huge thank you to everyone on the Council for giving your time and energy freely in the service of ambulance service patients and staff. To SECAmb staff who work so hard, and to the Chair and Board for engaging constructively with the Council. I do hope members feel we are adequately representing your interests and urge you to get involved. Opportunities are included in your membership newsletter, and we look forward to supporting more progress in the service in the coming year. So that's all from me, and I shall now hand over to Joe Garcia, our Director of Operations, who will be chairing the Q&A session.
Good afternoon, Team SECAmb. Welcome to this session. Now, this is where we liven things up a little bit. We're going to change the tempo and we're going to run a live question and answer session. So all the panel members are now anticipating that who's going to get the next question. The way this works is that you have the opportunity to ask a live typed question, that is, via your screen. If you click the 3 dots and look for the Q&A box on the left of the screen, once you've opened it up, that will allow you to ask a question. The panel members this afternoon are Philip Assel, our Chief Executive, David Astley, our Chair, Fiona Moore, Medical Director, Lucy Bloomer, Senior Independent Non-Executive Director, and David Hammond, Director of Finance and Corporate Services, and of course myself. So I may well field a question. Now, the way this works, panel members, is what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on the non-anonymous questions first. The non-anonymous questions first. So as you scroll down the questions, the first one of those is from Robin Kenworthy. And that is a question that's been coming around the update to development of the Kent and Medway Care Record project and the impact on SECAmb, given that given that in document form, and what Robin points out is a quote whereby he hopes that we're working towards the end of 2019 and beyond. So what I'm going to do, just to calm your nerves, guys, is I'm going to answer that question because I've been thankfully sent an update by AG. So we're actively working with Kent Medway and our system provider, and in order to do that, we're making sure that we're both working on the same underlying technologies, and that we anticipate both clinical control room staff and appropriate frontline crews having access to the Kent Medway Care Record late this year or early 2021. Now, David, I'm going to give David Hammond. I'm going to give you an opportunity to add anything else to that if you wish. You might want to come off mute.
Yeah, first error of the day, I think, on the mute button. Yeah, thank you very much, Joe, and thank you, Robin, for the question. You always ask excellent questions at the AMMs, and hopefully next year we'll see you in person again. I have very little to add to what Joe has said, which has come from AG, who's our IT lead on this project. And just to say, obviously, the impact of COVID across the system is being felt on lots of these projects, but we have continued to be involved. In direct answer to your question, the documentation as we go through the project will be passed through the normal trust governance processes as well, so can be shared across as necessary and published as needed. So hopefully that answers your question, Robin, and happy to answer anything more detailed, perhaps offline, after this forum.
Thank you very much, David, for that. Now, the next named question is from Frank Northcott. Once we've gone through the named ones, I'll then go and start our way through the anonymous ones. And Frank's question, back to you, David, which was quite simply, when will Brighton Make Ready Centre come online?
Thank you, Joe, and afternoon, Frank. So the planned completion date at the moment is spring next year. I can't be more accurate than that at the moment. We're just going through some interesting and intense negotiations with BT Openreach around the some of the connectivity to the site, which involves them doing some work in the highway. So we're just trying to pin them down to an exact date. So we're saying spring next year, and the construction is almost finished. But we do then need to do the fit out, and of course, without the technology being able to connect to the wider world, we won't be able to go live in the way that we'd want to. So we're still very optimistic that we'll hit our date of spring next year, but we do have a couple of issues which we're just ironing out at the moment. So as soon as we have a firm opening date, that will be published via the Trust website and various communications, and we hope to have a bit of an opening ceremony to celebrate the achievement that we've done there. So watch this space, I think, Frank.
Thank you for that, David. I'm going to move down to a question for Fiona. So Fiona, you're next, and it's around the care bundles being provided. And it says the slide on the bundle is illuminating, but it'd be helpful for this to be annotated with a number of patients who have been delivered that care, e.g. how many stroke patients. Have you got a comment on that, Fiona?
So thank you. Yes, that's a really good question. So we include all the stroke patients that we go to, and the patients who have confirmed STEMIs. We get the data from the national database. The actual numbers, I have to say, I don't know, but we do verify the data through the national database.
Thank you, Fiona. Hopefully that's answered the question. So the next question is around, it's from an anonymous caller, but I'm going to take this one myself as well, which was, what steps have we been able to take to address the delays our crews have past experience in handing over patients into our acute trust colleagues and to reduce these times to a minimum? So I'll answer that if I can, please, team. And that's, we've had an awful lot of success in working with our acute trusts to minimise handover delay. And for those that might not be close enough to the detail, our handover delays have been the lowest they have been for many number of years. In fact, we had a significant amount of success once we dedicated a senior manager within the trust, Gillian Week, to look at our handover delays and work with the acute sites, and we've had a massive improvement on that. In fact, we are some 400 hours a week less than we were pre-COVID at the moment, which just shows how we've managed to sustain that reduction. So thank you for that particular question. I'm going to let's ask the next one, which was around I think we've asked about integrating the EPCR. So pre-COVID response times across Kent, and this is, I suppose it's a question, a recruitment question really, which I suppose I'll probably take this one as well if that's okay. So based on the response times across Kent, which were variable and patchy pre-COVID, how do we feel that these differences have been addressed to level the service, particularly for West Kent? And that's really been around our focus on recruiting, and we are putting in significant numbers of additional newly qualified paramedics. We have, for the remainder of this calendar year, to be frank, we've got in excess of 100 additional newly qualified paramedics joining us. An awful lot are focused to be starting in the Paddockwood and Medway area to bolster those numbers. And in support of that, that's why there tends to be more private provider resource in that particular area. Let's move on. So this is a training question, which I'm going to probably ask Fiona, if I can, please. So this is a question, again, anonymous caller. Oh, he's put his name in there, actually. It's Robin Kenworthy in Kent. So the COVID-19 situation must have put considerable strain on both resources and abstraction for training. I'm seeking an assurance statement of arrears of training statutory and mandatory training, CPD and other training. Also, is a trust recovery plan to be published, please? So Fiona, what's your comments to that, please?
So thanks, Joe, and thanks, Robin. So continuing education and making sure that our staff stay up to date is absolutely a priority for us. And it's quite a difficult balance to ensure that we provide staff for operational delivery and patient safety as well as keeping them up to date. So throughout the earlier part of the year, we continued with our key skills delivery. That's been paused more recently, but during the time that I think Philip would have described as phase 2 of COVID, between June and August, when we saw demand on the service fall and a number of staff who were awaiting fit testing not being out on ambulances, we had the opportunity for them to undertake their key skills. Clearly, some of the practical elements of key skills training has not been possible during COVID because of the requirements for practical distancing. But going forward, we have got plans to address that. So as far as key skills is concerned, we've done really well this year in comparison to previous years. Yes, the trust is absolutely dedicated to providing continuing educational development. I think it's important to say that we now use one of the further education colleges to deliver our apprenticeship training, and that has continued being delivered online throughout the COVID period, which means that we've got staff who will be coming online in the future for us. So I hope that helps, Robin.
Thank you very much, Fiona. So the next question is around, I'm going to pass to, it's a named question from David Romain. I'll pass that to you, Philip, if I can. It's the time taken over the resolution of patient stroke paramedic disputes, and he can think of a case that's taken over 5 months to resolve. What would your response to that be, Philip?
Very much for the question. I don't know, obviously, the specific dispute that you are talking about, but in general, our disputes are settled as quickly as we can do them. But these processes are quite complex and have to be, and we do have to get them right and follow all the rules and take the right advice, etc., etc. So our legal department meet most of their targets, but there isn't a specific target for this patient paramedic disputes. It's got to be done safely and as quickly as we can do it, and we've tried to. I'm always disappointed by the length of time that all disputes take, because during the period of a dispute, everybody is unhappy. The person who's being claimed and against, and the person who's doing the claiming. So we're aware that they need to be done quickly, and we do them as quickly as we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. Now, David, as is my ability as ringmaster, I'm actually going to get you to do 2 questions. First one is around the charitable fund question, which you've seen on there. And is there a charitable fund which patients could contribute to purchase clinical equipment? And I'm going to follow that up by the finance question around investment for recruitment, retention and training. If you could cover those 2, please.
Thanks, Joe. So I'll do the charitable funds one first. The answer is absolutely. There's been a huge amount of work and generosity as well from the general public. So there are several ways now in which we can do this. There's obviously the National NHS Together charity, which SECAmb is a member of, and therefore has been very fortunate to receive donations and grants from. But in terms of SECAmb itself, we have a registered charity, which is exactly there to do, as the question suggests, to allow us to buy additional things over and above those which are funded by our general funding. There is a Just Giving link on our website, which we can also publish. I know Katie's in the periphery of this question and answer session, and Katie's one of our key one of the key reasons why this is so successful at the moment. So I'm sure in the chat and in various forums we'll point you to the Just Giving link on the website, where we would happily accept donations. We also run a charitable funds committee, which is effectively the trustees who oversee this independently and on behalf of the board, to make sure that we do make the right decisions when we come to spend the money, so it goes to the right things as well. So hopefully that answers the question. In terms of the other question, I'm just trying to find it. Investment in recruitment, retention and training. Yes, absolutely. It's one of our key areas, because whilst we continue to recruit into the trust, as we do regularly and as much as we can, one of our key other aspects is to keep as many staff as we can by making that making their working life the best that we can, and to be the best employer that we can. So there's two prongs with this. Ali Mohammed, as our new director of HR, is taking this forward. There's a huge amount of work going on around the around what we call staff engagement, and many of you will have experienced the amount of surveys that we're putting out there to try and understand what it is that people need, what it is people want, where we can best put those resources in order to keep staff safe and happy in what they do. So hopefully that answers the question. Very happy again to provide more details in other forums outside of this one.
Thank you very much, David. I'm going to take the question from Margaret Parker, which is the last one that's appeared on the new questions, which is around the abandonment of 111 calls. I suppose I'm probably best placed to answer that one, to be frank. So it's the number of abandoned 111 calls was high, but it's reducing, and it is known. Is it known how long patients wait before hanging up? So in answer to that, Margaret, the abandonment rate was extremely high, certainly during the peak of COVID. But SECAmb has prided itself on operating on an abandonment target that is some 3% below the national target, which is 5%. And we set a target at 2%, and we have been regularly achieving that target since we've managed to improve or come out of the COVID pressures. I'm unable at this time to tell you exactly what that the time is before patients abandon, because it is quite a range of time. What we measure, though, is the abandonments that take place after 30 seconds of the call ringing, because sometimes you get a short, what they class as a short abandonment, which is not necessarily conducive to somebody that's waited that long. But once we get that average for you, Margaret, we can send that on, because you've kindly put your name to that particular question. Looking through the other questions that we've got, recognising that we are slowly running down, there are a lot of questions we've had about fleet, so I might cover those in one go in a second. But first, David, I'm going to ask you the question around finance, and are we funded on a per capita population served basis, taking account of health inequalities? I suspect I know the answer, but I'm sure you can give that in much better detail than me.
Thank you, Joe. So the answer simply at the moment is not yet. It's certainly where it seems to be the direction of the 10-year plan, the NHS 10-year plan, to come down to population health commissioning or receiving income on that basis. And as we move more into the integrated care systems and away from the CCGs, and I'm just trying to get the first word of that acronym, clinical commissioning groups, we will see this as the direction of travel. But at the moment, we are commissioned on a regional basis across our 3 counties and a little bit of North East Hampshire, not necessarily on a population basis per se like that, and not in the way that it will be going forward, I think.
Thank you, David. So the questions why does SECAmb use so many third-party ambulance providers, and could SECAmb develop their own staff and give an opportunity for them instead? We absolutely are focused on developing our own staff. By the way, I'll take this one, panel. Don't fret. I'm not going to throw that at anybody. We absolutely provide the opportunities for our own staff. The simple fact is as our growth rate of requirement for staff is there, despite the fact that we bring in hundreds of new staff a year, we will always require some additional support so that we can target that support in the areas that need it most. It might seem a lot for some areas because that's where they're getting more of the support, but private providers only contribute about 6% of the response hours that SECAmb needs every day. So it's actually not quite as much as it might appear. So I've been told I've got 1 minute left. There are a number of questions which have been asked around fleet, in particular around the double crewed ambulances, Fiats and Mercedes. The choice of ambulance for ambulance services in the UK was pretty much removed from the ambulance services ability to choose once the Carter review work was undertaken. So Lord Carter initiated a review to see how could ambulance services best utilise their assets and funding to standardise where possible, and vehicles was a key area. And what the review provided was, or came up with, was the fact that a van conversion is far more cost effective than a saloon conversion. Now, the fact that it's a Fiat is only down to the fact that Fiat are the only manufacturer that make a chassis that meets the weight limits that we require, which was 4,250 kilograms as a minimum. Now, I know that fact. It's sad, isn't it? Now we will. What will happen is that the market will, no doubt, in other words, other vehicle manufacturers and the Volkswagen Group that make the Volkswagen Group. Let's call it that. I've forgotten what the acronym is now. They are looking. Thank you. They are looking to produce a similar chassis. That will create a choice. We are limited to going on a national framework for purchasing of vehicles, so that creates a limit at the moment, but the market will react to that, and as the move to more electric technology comes in, that will enable more options to be available. So it isn't a choice that's necessarily been taken by SECAmb, it's a choice that's been made on our behalf by Lord Carter. Now I'm going to finish, if that's okay, folks, with the question. It wasn't so much a question as more of a statement, and it was really around Team SECAmb, and the anonymous individual that put the statement up there was just really thankful that the video that we played was representative of every corner of our trust. And I have to say that was a fantastic video that really represented the team spirit and ethos. And throughout the COVID pandemic, we have been functioning as a really, really well-oiled, well-versed, well-practiced team. And that's been really, really evident. And I'm rightly proud, the whole leadership team are rightly proud of the performance and the efforts and the contribution that everybody has made to delivering effectively the product of Team SECAmb, which is care to our patients and looking after our staff. So that wraps up the Q&A session. I'm going to pass over to David Astley. If there are any named questions that we can pass an answer back to, we will. Unfortunately, because of the anonymous ones, we won't know who to send that back to. So, David.
Thank you, Joe. Just to finish on your theme of Team SECAmb, is just on behalf of the board is to thank all of our staff for the contribution they've made in the last year. It certainly has been a challenging year. Every year in the health service is a challenge. I think this last 12 months has thrown up issues none of us could have foreseen. Many of us have spent a long time working in public service, and it really has been a unique experience. And so can I thank all of our staff, in particular honour the memory of a number of our staff who have passed away this last year through physical illness. We've lost some valued colleagues, not least Patricia McGregor, who was one of our board members, who died after a short illness recently. So thank you all. I hope you found the these events today helpful, and we really hope this has improved your understanding of SECAmb as an organisation. We're going to share the recording of this meeting on our website and more widely on social media, so if you have a spare hour or two, please pass this on to your friends and make sure you sit down and watch through particularly the film. I think that's well worth recommendation to your friends. We recommend that to you without hesitation. If you any feedback, the question and answer box will remain open for the next 15 minutes or so. So please let's have your feedback, or drop us an email or a note, and we will take full attention to what you say to us. Can I thank all of the presenters today for their contribution, and our experts behind the scenes have orchestrated our first live annual members meeting, which I hope you've all found useful. So thank you indeed. Have a good afternoon, and if you're not working this weekend, have a pleasant weekend.